Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's time for the Brown Sports Bag. From the heart of the Barrens, a weekly local sports machine. Alongside John Butler, here's your host, James Brown.
All right, we're back again this week. John Butler will be joining us in about 20 or 25 minutes, but we're going to start this show off today talking to Justin Stinson. He's been the head coach for the Glasgow Lady Scotties for 10 years, and now he's stepping aside, trying to work his way toward, I guess, being a high school principal. Justin, thank you for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, James.
So let me just start this off with a quick question. You and I had a couple of discussions during the course of the year about all that was on your plate as an administrator, as a coach, as a teacher. Well, not as a teacher so much, but as a father to 4 children, just all the things that were on your plate. And I got the impression that you felt like you weren't able to do any of those things at 100%. Is that pretty accurate?
Yeah, I think so to some degree. You know, you always give everything your 100%, everything that you've got, but, you know, at the same time, there's only 24 hours in a day. So yeah. I feel like more than anything, it was probably spreading myself too thin, and you want to be able to be completely devoted. And when I looked at it, you know, I wanted to be a principal, and I knew I wanted to be a principal, and I wanted to make sure when that time comes, whenever that is, that I was 100% ready for it and 100% could give it everything I needed to give. So I felt like it's not something I really wanted to do, stepping away from basketball, but something more so I felt like I needed to do.
Yeah, and so I guess the school year is going to kind of going kind of crazy with the COVID-19 and school closings. Did that have any effect on your decision for deciding to do it now?
Not a great deal. Somewhat probably it did. Just because I was able to spend a little bit more time with my own family, with my kids, and you know, I told somebody earlier that I played more games of basketball in the driveway and more games of football in the front yard than I ever had, and I
right.
really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and so you mentioned the principal part of this. How far away are you from being able to achieve that particular goal?
Well, I mean, it's just a matter of fact of getting the job. I've got all the certifications and all the things that I need. It's just, you know, when the time comes for an opportunity, I've not applied for a head principal job yet, but whenever that time comes, I want to make sure I can do that job and do it well.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the team that you had this year. You guys had a good season. I imagine coming into the year, you believed that you guys were a team that could win the 4th region, and it just didn't quite pan out for you guys this year. But tell me about you having the discussion with the players, especially the ones that will be returning next year, making the decision to step away now.
Well, you know, it was tough because of the situation we're in with the COVID-19. You know, I would love to have been able to sit down with them and talk to them face to face, but that just wasn't in the cards the way circumstances we're in right now. So, you know, I sent them a text message and sent them a letter, and had a lot of one-on-one conversations with kids. But you just try to help them understand, and everybody has been really supportive. You know, there are some that I think were pretty sad, but at the same time, they understand and are supportive.
Yeah, I mean, when we had Kayla Bradley on here, I mean, she talked about the fact that you guys, your team is like a family, and I think I've heard that echoed in other arenas since the announcement last week. What is it that you've done that has helped these players feel like you guys are one big family?
You know, it's just about relationships. You know, it's about investing in people, and, you know, anytime, it's always about communicating openly and honestly, and, you know, guess what? We fight and bicker sometimes, and I get upset, and they get upset at me, but at the end of the day, I think everybody knows there's a mutual love there, and I hope they know that I'll do anything for them, and I certainly felt that, you know, going back to the previous year when my daughter was sick in the middle of the regional tournament, just how my players made me and my family feel, it was just unbelievable and reciprocated. And but again, it just gets back to invest in people and showing and honest, open communication all the time.
Is that something that you learned from a particular coach growing up, or that you worked with, or is that just something you feel like you've always kind of had an innate ability about? The connection with people?
Maybe some of both. You know, I'm a big believer in people over programs, you know, and investing in people. And, And sometimes when you get into coaching, one of my mentors, Mike Haynes, always told me this. He says, "You're never going to please everyone. If you try to please everyone, don't do it. Coaching's not for you. All you've got to be able to do is look yourself in the mirror and say, did I do the best I thought I could?" And that's what I've tried to do.
Well, and you mentioned the best you thought you could do. I mean, it's been pretty good through the 10 years at Glasgow. Because when you took over the program, Glasgow's Lady Scotties were not really known to be a powerhouse program in the 15th District or the 4th Region. And you took over, I don't think, maybe they had one winning season in the 10 years prior to before you took over. And it may have gone back further than that. I don't remember exactly. But basically, other than a couple of runs there in the 70s and in the late 80s, middle 90s area, Glasgow had not really had sustained success. And you guys, I mean, you had 10 winning seasons in your time there. So when you came in, what was it that you did that you feel like put this program on the path forward?
Well, I don't think there's anything I did other than invest in people and invest in kids. We had a great group. My first year, 2010-11, didn't have any seniors.
Mm-hmm.
And that group was kind of led. Juniors was Haley Perkins and Shelby Ray, and those were great catalysts. They kind of set the tone, and we were able to go and win the region for the first time in school history their senior year there in 2012, went 28-5, and I think that kind of springboarded us, and what that did was that created a whole group of young kids who said, man, this is pretty awesome. This is something I want to be part of. And we worked really hard. I worked really hard in those early days to get down to the middle school, and you had middle school coaches like Robin Bartley at the time, and then later on Rachel Dial, who poured into kids and really invested in our program and didn't have an agenda. They just wanted to help kids. They were great to work with. Get the high school coach, and we began to streamline things, 6th grade all the way up to 12th grade, and we really reaped the benefits of the high school of that.
Yeah, one of the things I remember about that your first year there is that you mentioned the juniors. I mean, you had some talented juniors, but it felt like that they had not lived up to their potential at that point. And I know they were younger players, but a lot of people had a lot of expectations for them. And that seemed to be the thing, is that you managed to convince them to play, I guess, for themselves in a way that maximized their potential. Is that kind of what you felt like happened?
Oh, yeah, they did. They were great kids, and they worked harder. And, I can remember sitting up, I think I took the job like a middle of a week, and 2 days later we were hosting a team camp. And what I did was I began to have one-on-one meetings with kids, and we'd go pick a seat while some other team was playing up at the top of the gym, and I just get to know our kids and find out about them and kind of try to get what made them tick. And I realized right off the bat that I had some very competitive kids. And when you get some competitive kids that want to work hard, and certainly they had some talent, and we had some good young players coming, I think it was a recipe there for a perfect storm.
Yeah, and you had an opportunity to see these players play because you were an assistant coach for the boys. So, I mean, you at least had some familiarity with the players that you'd be inheriting.
I had some familiarity with how they could play basketball, but because I wasn't a teacher that year in the building, I really didn't have a personal relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
Other than knowing what their name was. That was about the extent of it, honestly. I did have some familiarity with Shalika's family because of my time in Monroe County. Her family came over from Monroe County a few years previously. I'd known some of her brothers and things because they were in the feeder system when I was the head coach boys coach at Monroe.
Yeah. Now, after that, especially Shelby Ray and Haley Perkins graduated, I mean, you guys managed to keep it going. I mean, the next year, you guys lost one of the wildest district finals probably ever. 90-84 in double overtime against Allen County Scottsville with a banked three-pointer that sent the game into the second overtime, I think?
Yeah, it was about a 40-footer, I think.
Yeah.
It was crazy. We were up 4 with like 15 seconds to go, and they had the ball, and they called a silly foul on us. It was not a foul. It was 60 feet, not even the half court, 60 feet for running into a screen, and it stopped the clock, and they made 2 free throws, and we go down and make 1 of 2, and then they come down and bank that 40-footer in. I think Shalika fouls out of the first play of the next overtime.
Yeah. I'll never forget that, just because when she shot the three-pointer, I was like, there's no way that thing's going in, and then it went in.
I'm not even sure, James. I don't even know how she was strong enough to get it to the basket.
Yeah, it was one of those where everybody in the gym said, "Oh my gosh," and they were like, "Oh my gosh," and I'm sure that was more or less your response too. It
was, but you know what? And that was so crazy. We were banked in 3 in double overtime, I think, from winning 3 straight district titles in an unbelievably tough district.
Right. Yeah, because at that particular point in time, you guys, Monroe and Allen County, were 3 of the top teams, probably top 25 in the state, maybe top 30 in the state, the 3 of you together. I mean, it's pretty impressive, and that's one of the things about your 10-year run here in the 15th district until this particular season. 9 of these 10 years, 3 of the top teams in the 4th region have been in this district year in and year out.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, when you look at all the things that we were able to accomplish, you know, getting to the region 9 of 10 years out of this district, you know, we didn't just roll up a bunch of wins against cupcakes from a weak region or a weak district. You know, it was a tough schedule year in and year out. And we just had so many great kids come through, and it was such a team effort.
Well, let's not just focus on the wild bad ones that worked out for you. Let's also talk about these 2 regional championships. The first one you guys won the district and the 4th region. You beat Monroe County in both of those games. And I don't want to necessarily put you on the spot, but for you, that must have been at least somewhat personally gratifying, considering you are a Monroe County kid and you were able to go somewhere else and be successful.
It was, you know, there's no lies to tell. Absolutely it was. And I had somebody from Monroe County come up to me, and if you remember, the first 2 times that season, Monroe County got us.
Mm-hmm.
They got us the first regular season game. They got us to the finals of the Class A region that year. And the 3rd time we come back and played, and we beat them by 20. And I didn't know it till after the fact. A guy from over Monroe County, coaches youth league and stuff, he says, I told somebody, he said, Monroe's beating Glasgow for the last time. And fortunate for us, we beat them in the district finals and then went ahead and beat them in the regional finals as well.
Yeah, and then you got to the state for the first time. It's played over at Diddle Arena, and I can't imagine what kind of experience that was for your players, especially your 2 seniors. Can you kind of reflect upon that? Because Glasgow had never been to the state tournament before that.
You know, unbelievable, James. It was just, you know, and it couldn't be from 2 better kids. Obviously, we had a whole bunch of kids come through, but for Haley and Shelby, man, to invest so much and lead our program out of the doldrums, basically, and to walk out of that tunnel and look up and it be, you know, what felt like 5,000 members of Scotty Nation there. I think it was a noon game on a Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken, and middle of the week, middle of the day, and just had a huge, huge crowd. And that's one thing I'll always remember is the fact that how big, not just the dog pound, but the people that followed us, because you and I both know people don't always follow girls basketball.
Yeah.
But at Glasgow, over the last 10 years, man, they've really followed our kids, and I so appreciate that.
Well, and then you came back off of the wild 2013 district final, and then won again in 2014. Won the district, won the region, and really, I think one of the things I remember is I believe it was in that regional final. You just started running ISO for Bree Glover. I think she was in the 8th grade, and I believe that was the game that was kind of the eye opener, not just for what Glasgow was as a team, but some of the special talent you had, young talent especially.
In 2014?
Yeah.
She would have been Bree was a sophomore then.
Okay.
And if you remember, that was that may be the best half of basketball I've ever seen. I think we were up on Bowling Green 31 at halftime of the regional finals. It was like 47-19 or 17 or something like that. It was crazy.
Yeah. I just recall, I mean, that was probably the most, and that season, the record wasn't as good as, say, the 2012 record, but I think maybe, and I'm not trying to slight your previous players here, but I think that team may have been the culmination of everything that you wanted your team to look like on the floor, to me.
Well, we certainly beefed up the schedule that year, and we played Christmas tournament up in Montgomery County, which is one of the elite Christmas tournaments in the state. And Ellie got hurt. You remember, Ellie was hurt and missed 3 or 4 games in the middle of the year, had a hip injury, and we dropped a couple of those. But we really began to peak there. That's the year we won the Class A state, and went on to win the region after that as well.
Yeah, and you guys, I mean, you mentioned Shalika, but, I mean, you guys could run the floor and you could run, like, post offenses. I mean, you seem to have just everything a coach would want for his team.
Yeah, that was a special group. I always tell our kids, got to be able to win playing slow, playing medium, and playing fast. And that was a group that could do that. We could pound it inside to Shalika and score. We could get out with three and those guys and run on the wings and play kind of in the middle of the road, play zone, play man. Just we defended and rebounded. Just a really complete team.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this question. So you've been involved with the youth sports program for Glasgow for the last few years, coaching in the Gap League and getting to know some of the younger players. I mean, you've got a daughter who's coming up. Do you expect to get back into coaching at some point, or are you looking at this like, well, if I'm making this transition to the next stage in my career?
I don't know. I don't know. I love coaching basketball. I am making this decision primarily for the next stage in my career, because I do know I want to be a principal. But I still love coaching. I'll always love coaching. And whether that's coaching the Gap League or whether that's giving private lessons to somebody or whether that's come back and coaching maybe after I retire.
Yeah.
It could be 15 years down the line that I get back into coaching. But I love basketball, and this wasn't a decision at all about me not loving to coach or not loving our kids.
Yeah, I imagine that, like you mentioned, I imagine that's why your players, knowing you so well and the family atmosphere you have around your program, I imagine that they understood exactly where you were coming from when you communicated with them about this decision.
Yeah, and I did. And I had one kid tell me, say, Coach, I know it's hard on you and your wife with 4 kids, but this wasn't about them. My wife is unbelievably supportive, and she does an awesome job, and my parents come into all the ball games and help her with the kids. And when I told my oldest daughter, she has known nothing but Lady Scotty's basketball. Just cried and cried and cried and said, I want you to coach, Daddy, I want you to coach. And that was the hardest thing on me, having to tell her and how she responded. But it is one big family, and my girls work great with my own kids, and I wouldn't have had it any other way than have them right there with me.
Yeah. Before we get off of here, is there anything that you can think of that you'd like to mention or say?
No, just I'm so appreciative of the Scotty family, and I told you earlier about 7:30. I told you earlier about the state tournament. I can still remember vividly in 2014 when we drew a 7:30 a.m. game in Frankfurt on a Wednesday.
Yeah.
And having so many people there, unbelievably supportive student section, and so many people there, and just the way they've always followed us and traveled to see our teams play, and just so many people have reached out this week and last week, and just it has been a great run, and I'm so thankful to be able to have that opportunity to lead this program for the last 10 years.
Yeah. Well, Justin, I want to tell you, I've always enjoyed talking to you, especially, as we have our sideline soccer conversations, etc. And I expect to see you out there again this fall. I still believe we're going to have fall sports despite some of the conversations, and so I look forward to those conversations again and talking to you just about whatever we end up talking about, because it's always a pleasure, Justin.
Well, I appreciate that, James. I appreciate your friendship and everything you guys do for high school kids and high school athletics in our area.
All right. Well, Justin Stinson, good luck to you on your search for a principal's job and the next stages in your career. And I'm sure we will see you again on the basketball court. This is the Brown Sports Bag, brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
We're back, and John Butler joins us now to talk a little bit about what we saw from Coach Stinson, Justin Stinson, as a coach at the Glasgow Scotties over the last decade, and also what this means for the future of the district, for the program, and I guess the fourth region, because the Lady Scotties do have some talent coming back. John, thanks for joining the show.
Hey, glad to be here.
So, real quick, you were a coach. You were the coach at Barron County and had a good run there when Justin took the job at Glasgow. And really in the 15th district for most of the time, probably while you were the coach at Barron County, Glasgow was the other school. It was like the fourth, of the four schools a lot of times. But what did you see that changed once Justin took over that program in 2010-11?
Well, I mean, Glasgow had some periodic success during that time. I don't want you to think that they had no success at all. They did. But Justin obviously did a good job, and what half always is, do you have good players? And
right.
and he had some good players coming back his first year, and then when you throw in down the road Glover and Ellie Bartley and Goler and people like that, that's the ingredients to have a real special team, and he did a good job with it.
Yeah, I say this jokingly, but maybe he hastened your exit from coaching girls basketball in a way, because I think, and the worst thing that can happen in an inter-county rivalry is for the other team to be good all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, it's I don't know about that. I mean, I like competition and so forth, but I will say where we were starting to struggle during my last few years, Glasgow's talent really picked up.
Yeah,
and that didn't make it easier.
Yeah, I bet. So how does it now, Justin? I think he's the third girls coach in the fourth region that we've seen that will be, or third program that'll be changing coaches in the fourth region. The other two being Franklin Simpson and Warren Central. But I would say that Glasgow probably has the most known talent coming back for next year. How do you think this impacts? Let's just start at the 15th district level. How do you think this impacts the 15th district itself?
Well, I mean, coming back, well, first of all, it's going to be interesting who replaced Justin.
Yeah.
And right now I have no idea, but it will be a good job to take because of the job he's done as well. I think coming back this year, Barron is probably going to be the favorite to win the district. Even though they lose Elizabeth Bertram, they still have two starters back and another player that contributed a lot. Raven Ennis turned into she had a fabulous year. Katie Murphy will have another year under the point, and she's a good player. And I thought Macy Lockhart had a really good freshman year.
Yeah.
So those three will, plus there's some other role players, I think will make Barron pretty good. Glasgow will be good. I mean, they have Ansley Adwell back and Dynasty Page, but they also lost some key players, and so I think it's Barron, Glasgow. Allen got better as the year went on, and Monroe is still very young.
Yeah. I mean, when you talk about Monroe, I mean their best player was a freshman, and she didn't start, which I couldn't figure out. But and then, as you mentioned, Allen County got better, and I think a lot of that had to do with Allison Metter getting healthier as the season went along, because she was key, I thought, to them. And you mentioned Glasgow, Adwell, and Page, and really, I mean, the spotlight will probably be on Adwell in a lot of ways, but Dynasty's Page, I thought, played real well during the course of the year for Glasgow.
She did, especially the games I saw. I mean, I saw the Barron games, and every Barron game she played, I thought she played well.
Yeah.
And obviously, Ansley's a proven player. She's played several years, and so anytime you got two guards that are back, that's a big asset.
Yeah. And then outside of that, in the fourth region, I mean, we already talked about some of the changes.
Bowling Green.
Yeah, I mean, Bowling Green's basically bringing everything back except for two players that really played a lot. So I mean,
well, their best players are back, and their best players are Division I talent.
Right. Yeah, that's Sanaya Shelton. I mean, it's easy to remember it's easy to forget how young she actually is.
And you throw in that they're probably very motivated and very hungry since they didn't get to play in the state tournament.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. So we didn't talk about this yet, but since we were on air last week, they went ahead and made the cancellations for the spring season, and there will be no makeup of the state basketball tournaments. So there probably is a lot of teams, especially when you look at Bowling Green boys and girls, both of whom, I mean, the Bowling Green boys did not make it to the state tournament, but they had no seniors. They changed coach. D.G. Sherrill's coming back as their coach. So Bowling Green's boys and girls are poised to be hard to beat next year.
Both will be top 10 in the state. I'm pretty confident.
Yeah. And going back on the girls' side, I mean, it's the gap between Bowling Green and everybody else this year turned out to be wider than we thought it was at the start of the year, and they proved it during the course of that regional tournament.
Yeah, and it'll probably be wider next year.
Yeah, that's right. So, I mean, as we look at next season, I mean, if you were just to, I mean, we kind of broke down the 15th district, but if you were to kind of look at the whole of the area next year, I mean, what is it as a coach? What would you be looking at? How would you be getting ready for next year if we were outside these circumstances we're in at the moment?
If we were outside these circumstances?
Yeah, just generally speaking, because these circumstances, I don't think there's no precedent for it.
Right. Well, all you can do as a coach is try to be the best that you can be. And you can't worry about how good Bowling Green's going to be or how good other people are going to be. So your job as a coach is to improve your individual players and to come up with some type of offensive or defensive concept that fits your players, and you can't worry about necessarily what other teams are doing.
Yeah, it's going to be a challenge, especially with, I mean, if it was a regular off-season, it would be a challenge for the coaches girls coaches in the 4th region next year, but it's especially a challenge under the circumstances we have.
It is, but it's kind of similar to how it was when we started. Outside of 2 or 3 weeks that you had in June, you were not allowed to work with your players.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's a different environment, but you're right. I mean, it's kind of a throwback in a lot of ways.
That's correct, and I think some coaches may ended up enjoying the time away.
Do you think this is just a sidebar? Do you think that this dead period, as it is shaped up, will be a catalyst for maybe changing how some of these off-season programs work?
I hope so. I've advocated all along that when we went to year-round coaching, except for the 2-week dead period in the summer, was a bad idea.
Yeah, I mean, I get that part of that was to try to counteract the influence of the AAU and let high school coaches have more time with their players, but I don't think it's been a positive for the players because what I've seen and what I think we've seen is a decline in participation in some of the sports.
We have. And some of it's burnout. Some of it is pressure to play only one sport. You don't want to get behind in your other sports. And I think a lot of that is contributed to the rule change about 10 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I would like to see us I was thinking about this the other day. I would love to see more players participate in more sports just because I think it's good for them. And that movement was already kind of afoot before this whole circumstance arose, and maybe we'll see more of that because if you have some players that only participated in these spring sports and they did not play fall or winter sports, they missed out on a season, and maybe the players in the future start to look at this and say, I'd like to have a senior season no matter how it shapes up, even if it's not the sport that I primarily want to play.
Hey, I agree. That's a good point.
All right, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. We'll be right back to talk about the NFL Draft.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, I think the draft this year was pretty interesting in a lot of ways because we got to see the homes or at least the settings that coaches and general managers wanted us to see. And it was kind of entertaining, some of the backgrounds and that kind of thing and the people's responses to it. But the draft itself pretty much went chalk, at least through the first 10 picks, I think.
Well, I enjoyed it. I mean, it was just something different, something live, and something sports related. And for somebody who likes this stuff, it was it was fun to watch, and I thought they did a good job too in terms of the presentation. Overall, I thought the networks did a pretty good job. Sometimes I get a little tired with every player has some sad, tragic story they had to kind of tell. It gets a little tiresome, but for the most part, I thought they did a good job.
Yeah, talking about that part, it reminded me of like watching the Olympics, and everybody has a story in the Olympics, and I'm sure there's research.
Same way, I agree. Yes.
Yeah, but I just get tired of it. I'm like, okay, can I just see the sports themselves, or have some discussion about the sports itself?
I'm the same way. I agree.
But I'm with you on the broadcast and that kind of thing, because I didn't know what to expect, but I thought they did a really good job, and it's the highest rated draft ever, which may have something to do with the fact there's no other sports going on. But I imagine also.
How about hint to professional sports leagues and maybe let's get going a little bit. Let's play a little golf or something. Something needs to come on TV. I think we can pull it off.
Yeah, I imagine the first one, whichever way gets something on television, is going to get rewarded handsomely. But then again, they are discussing the idea of baseball and whatnot, and golf maybe even without fans on.
That's all right.
And I'm with you in this sense. I mean, we've discussed this before. When it comes to college football and college sports, it's not about the fans in the stands. At least the money's not. It's about the TV rights and the advertising. Right. So, I mean, when it comes to the money, getting it on TV takes care of that part for them. I'm sure there'll be some lacking in fan experience. But, of course, they used to have stand-up comedies where they'd have the laugh tracks. I'm sure they could just put fan tracks in there and everybody would not know the difference.
Well, they can do, the way things are, people are very creative, and I think the public needs something, and I think a lot of the players would be more than willing to play.
Yeah, I hear you. And I think there's a discussion with the NBA about how they can do this with the isolation of the teams. They just got to figure out the logistics of who makes the playoffs and not makes the playoffs and that kind of thing, I think, as much as anything at this point. But let's get back to this draft real quick. So we weren't surprised. Cincinnati took Joe Burrow, number 1 overall. A friend of mine, Jason Harbison, put on Facebook the fact that the first 3 picks were Ohio State players, but I pointed out to him, and he was tired of hearing about all this SEC stuff, and I pointed out to him that if Ohio State would have held on to the number 1 overall pick, maybe we'd be discussing the Buckeyes having a national title instead of some other team from the Deep South. He kind of chuckled at that idea. But anyway, Joe Burrow was number 1 overall pick. Nobody was surprised by that at all. Chase Young was number 2. Nobody was surprised by that. I mean, it basically was chalk. I'd say that the Andrew Thomas pick by the Giants at number 4 is probably the most either way. Could have picked somebody else other than Andrew Thomas, but I think everybody knew that's who they were going after. And then the Dolphins got their man. They tried to tank for him apparently, but they still ended up with Tua Tagovailoa as their quarterback there at the number 5 pick. And I think I thought that was great for the Dolphins.
Yeah, it was a good pick. No question. If I was Washington, I told you last week, I'd have picked him. So I think that was a solid pick. He may have to sit for a year or whatever, but you don't get many chances to get. I think what most people will agree is a franchise type of quarterback, and Miami grabbed it, and I thought that was a great pick.
Yeah, and then the Chargers went ahead and took Justin Herbert out of Oregon. And I'm here to tell you, I'm really just not sold on Oregon quarterbacks so far. I've not seen one that I felt like panned out to the potential everybody thought they would have coming into the league.
I'm not against Oregon quarterbacks per se. I mean, they've changed their offense, so it's not the same kind of the offense that they had earlier. But I'm a little fuzzy on Justin Herbert myself. I'm not sold that he will be a great one.
Well, and that kind of leads me to the 7 and 8 picks. I thought Carolina got a steal with Derek Brown at defensive tackle there, and to the point that I think it puts them back into discussion, especially signing Teddy Bridgewater and locking down some of their offensive talent, and bringing in some talent. Their defense was still pretty decent last year, and they just added pieces. It seemed like I think Carolina might be a threat next year.
Well, we'll see. I will say they're in a tough division.
They are.
A division that can really score, and Carolina is the first team I think I read in draft history to draft all defensive players. They did not draft an offensive player.
I guess they looked up and said, when we made it to the Super Bowl, we had one of the best defenses in the league, probably the best defense in the league. And what we asked Cam Newton and the offense to do was just not turn the ball over, and for Cam Newton to make some plays that he could make because he was a special physical talent and had some decent receivers. So I'm guessing that was the way. What they looked at was, Teddy Bridgewater looked like a really good quarterback for the Saints last year, and as long as he can play at that level, if our defense is good enough, we have a shot. I guess that's what they were thinking.
I guess they got Christian McCaffrey too.
Yeah, that's right. And then, of course, Arizona got Isaiah Simmons, and I know you're high on him.
I like him. Yes, I think Arizona was surprised for him to fall that way.
Yeah, and then we had the Jedrick Willis, who was a Lafayette graduate, Alabama player, offensive tackle, taken by the Browns at number 10.
Yep. Happy for him and happy for his family. I know his dad quite well, and so they're going to go to a very competitive spot. The Browns have not had a great history lately, but it looks like they're on the verge of getting it turned around. And then you have the University of Louisville player that went next to the Jets, and Micaiah Beckford.
Yeah. Now, I tell you what, I think the first-round steal pick to me was the Minnesota Vikings getting Justin Jefferson. I feel like he's a outstanding wide receiver.
Could be. He fell to 22, and
yeah.
It's hard for me to tell. I'll be honest with you. Unless you're a draft expert, it's hard for me to judge. I can't really tell who's a great offensive lineman and defensive back and things like that. It's really, really difficult. I just kind of see the splash players when I watch college.
Yeah. And
it's kind of hard to see. Jefferson looked like a really good player to me, but the Dallas pick I thought was, even though technically they may not have needed a receiver, I thought C.D. Lamb was really good at Oklahoma. So it's it's hard to get a read from a novice perspective about who did what and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
I just know that I hated the pick of the Packers more than I can say on the air. When they went with the quarterback, they moved up to get a quarterback on a team that, to me, lacks offensive weapons for a great quarterback, and they did not pick one receiver. I watched them play almost every week last year, and they needed more. I just think they needed more weapons to go with a great quarterback, and it seems like to me they're turning the Packers into the Titans. They want to be primarily a running team, and make a throw when they have to make a throw.
Yeah, they play like we're going to do it our way, and then we're going to call on Aaron Rodgers to bail us out.
And to with so many good receivers and not to give him another weapon. I don't understand the pick at all.
Yeah, somebody pointed out that whenever the Packers had Brett Favre, they picked Aaron Rodgers. I think, was he 27 or 27, something like that. Whenever they still had Brett Favre, and they were planning for the future at that point. But I would say that Jordan Love of Utah State does not project to be the next Aaron Rodgers.
No, and how many times has that happened? Where they struck gold 15 years ago. I don't see it happening quite the same again. And plus, they were in the NFC Championship game.
Uh-huh.
And they got mashed by San Francisco. But you could tell they needed, even if they draft a good defensive linebacker or something, would be better than drafting. They drafted a player that will not help them in at least 3 years.
Yeah,
and that just doesn't make sense to me on a good team.
You mentioned the how difficult it is to kind of look at players playing in college, seeing the splash plays without being able to get down deep into the numbers. One of the things I find interesting, though, is that you have Joe Burrow, number 1 overall pick. Now, Justin Jefferson is taken 22nd in the first round, and then you kind of have the same setup with Tua Tagovailoa and Jerry Jeudy and some of the other talent that is on the Alabama team and the LSU team that got drafted in this NFL draft. It's kind of, I know you can look at the film and look at the numbers and you can kind of break down that stuff, but I still think it's just difficult sometimes to know with the naked eye which player was contributed more on a particular play than another player in football.
True, it is. What helps though is with LSU. Even though obviously they had more people drafted than any other team,
Right.
and SEC was you're talking about a runaway. They were a runaway leader with people drafted. But the one thing you could tell with LSU is that they played the best of the best. A lot of the defensive backs and defensive players that were drafted high, LSU and Joe Burrow and Alabama played against them as well.
Uh-huh.
So you could actually see, good player upon good player playing against each other.
Yeah, real quick, that leads me to another thing. Another player I thought that was a steal in the second round by the Giants was Xavier McKinney out of Alabama. He kind of reminds me of the kind of safety that is kind of an old school. If they still let you just knock people out coming across the lane, across the middle of the field, he'd be that kind of safety.
I agree. I mean, he fell a long way. The problem, though, is you can't play that way anymore.
Yeah.
That's the problem. Safeties anymore have to be used more in coverage as opposed to we'll wait till you get there and then we'll just intimidate you. Like Ronnie Lott and people like that. That you can't play in the NFL that way anymore. I mean, you'll be kicked out of the league or you'll have so many penalties you hurt your team.
Yeah, and then finally, Lynn Bowden was taken number 80 by the Las Vegas Raiders.
Third round, yep.
Yeah, they have him down here as a running back wide receiver. And he strikes me as the kind of player, and we mentioned this just briefly last week, like he's just a football player. I mean, he'll stick around the league, I think, for a long time as long as he's healthy, because he seems to be the kind of player that has instincts for the game. Just watch him play in Kentucky. You
can play him in so many different ways. He's clearly one of those gadget players. I do think he's going to be more of a running back, or he'll probably be used a lot on the goal line. He could be one of those wildcat quarterbacks at the goal line.
Yeah.
Special teams, run back kicks and punts, and some receiver. I don't think a lot because they drafted two other receivers as well as him.
Yeah, he's kind of a bigger Darren Sproles. Probably not as quick, but a bigger Darren Sproles kind of player.
Yeah, and I think with Jay Gruden, John Gruden, with his offensive mind, they'll find a way to get him the ball.
Yep. Well, this is Brown Sports Bag brought to you by McDonald's of Glasgow. When we come back, we're going to specifically talk about the Tennessee Titans draft.
Presented by McDonald's of Glasgow, it's back to the studio with James and John, the Brown Sports Bag.
Well, John, the Tennessee Titans made it to the AFC Championship game before they ran into the buzzsaw that is the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. And I thought in this draft, one of the things that they tried to do was maybe bolster their defense some, because their defense was fine last year. It's just that they were mainly good on defense because they could give the ball to Derrick Henry and control the clock, leaving the other team's offense without a whole lot of opportunities.
And, the defense was okay. You're right. The running game helped their defense. They did have some takeaways. I think that's what they were pretty good at. Some takeaways. But when it came down to it, that was probably their weakness. But two of the first three Titans picks were offensive players, though.
Yeah, what is it? Offensive lineman in the first round, Isaiah Wilson out of Georgia, and then they took the running back out of Appalachian State, who's the fastest player at the combine. And he was a lot of fun to watch if you ever saw any of his plays from college. But, of course, I think App State runs kind of a option attack, so a little bit different. But maybe they'll figure out a way to use that in these days in the NFL.
Oh, they'll use him. I mean, it's clearly a run. They're going to be a run oriented behind a huge offensive line. I mean the first round pick, Isaiah Wilson, he's only a slim 6'7", 350.
Maybe there's a couple of
from Georgia, so he's played good competition, obviously at a high level. So they lost their I think right tackle to free agency, so he'll probably slide in that spot.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to have a backup to Henry because he can't carry the load the whole year like he did at the end of the year, and so that they do need a backup running back, and so the Evans kid out of Appalachian State. When you draft a running back in the third round, running backs are expected to play.
Yeah.
That's probably the easiest transition in football. So he's there for to either change the pace, I assume, back or whatever.
Yeah.
And their second round pick is the cornerback from LSU, and that's obviously designed to fix some of the problems that they had. And if you watch them against Kansas City, they obviously had trouble at times covering. Now, part of that is I didn't think they had a very good defensive line in terms of pressure the quarterback, but the cornerback position is a very coveted spot in the NFL, especially how pass-happy the league is.
Yeah, and to your point about the defensive line, I mean, their fourth pick, which was actually in the fifth round, was defensive lineman Laryl Murchison from North Carolina State. I mean, admit, I don't know anything about him, and I don't know much about North Carolina State, so I guess he'll help fill some sort of hole that they thought they had there on the defensive line.
Possibly, but I have no idea. To be totally honest with you, I have no clue. It's just North Carolina State is decent ACC, but I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, and then of course they ended up with 2 seventh-round picks. I think they traded back into the 7th round to get one of these guys, and then
got a fly on a quarterback from Hawaii.
Yeah, Cole McDonald out of Hawaii. That's one of those things where it's like, hey, he's still around. Well, I guess we might as well take him and see how it works. It works out for other people sometimes.
Yes. I don't know a lot about Hawaii football. Sorry.
I can't remember, what was Eric Coryell? Is that guy still at Hawaii? I can't remember what his name is all of a sudden.
June Jones.
Yes, that's it.
Yeah, well, he is. Yes, they can throw it.
Yeah, so he probably put up about 10,000 yards last year, and nobody saw one of them.
Hawaii is, they have been known throughout the years of being creative offensively, and this guy, June Jones, is especially, I think, was an offensive guru.
Yeah, I said Eric Coryell, but it was really run and gun when he was at Atlanta, right? That's what it
right.
was called, run and gun.
Run and gun, yeah. Eric Coryell was at San Diego.
Yeah. That's. I got my pass happy teams mixed up. So let's revisit something we talked about earlier. We mentioned kind of offhand that DG Sherrill is back as the boys basketball coach at Bowling Green, and they have no seniors, and they have some. I mean, Isaiah Mason is going to be one of the best players in the state, I think, and they have some other good players, but I think he's the key to the team for them in so many ways. What did you kind of think about this transition to DG coming back there as the head coach after a 3-year hiatus?
I don't think anybody in the region is surprised.
No, I'd agree with you there.
Yeah, I mean this. As soon as Coach Club resigned, that's the first thought came to my mind. That DG is coming back, and anybody that I think pretty much knows that DG when he left, I don't think he's burnt out. No. He took an administrative position mainly. I mean, there's a financial increase in money and so forth, and but he stayed the athletic director as well, and has been active at all the games and so forth. And I never ever thought for one second that he was done when he got out, and it just he would be the natural person to replace. I mean, he didn't have to go out and look outside the school system. And what's going to make it really good for Bowling Green is, regardless of who comes in, Bowling Green's going to be the favorite to win the region. And again, I don't know if they're as big a favorite to win it as the Bowling Green girls, but they're going to be close.
Yeah, because, I mean, Warren Central, I mean, I know they graduated with the Skylar Potter class, and everybody, 2 years ago, everybody thought they would take a dip, and they had the kids who moved in. A couple of them were impact players in Kobe Brents and Dre Boyd, but they had a bunch of other kids who didn't play where they were before. I mean, they were bench warmers and that kind of stuff, and they came in and contributed. And they had some players that were already in the program that stepped up the last couple of years, and Warren Central's won the region in the 2 years. I think a lot of people thought Bowling Green would be the winner of the region.
Yeah, but Warren Central will be good, but they're not going to be quite ready, I don't think. But you never know. I think their freshman team was undefeated.
Yeah.
But that's still a big jump. And but Coach Williamson, he does a great job. But Bowling Green is by far the favorite.
Yeah. Well, and if you're a coach returning to coach a team, this seems like the perfect team to return to for you.
Well, yeah, you're same school, and it's not like Coach Sherrill's been out 100 years. He's been out 3 years, and has been still associated with the program and so forth. And I think he did mention all the players that he has on his team. He had in camp. You know, when you have your camps, you know, youth camps. He's coached a bunch of them. So it will be a seamless transition, and the only hiccup is going to be he's not going to be able, as of right now, to have any time with his players or to put in a different system if he does.
All right, John, we got to go. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening, and be sure and join James and John once again next Monday at 4 for the Brown Sports Bag, a local weekly sports machine presented by McDonald's of Glasgow.
Coming soon to your FM dial, this is Fox Sports Radio, WCDS Glasgow, AM 1230.